As you guys know that watch regularly, I'm really enjoying these one-to-one interviews with people in our community that have had some kind of an impact in our community or just have a positive story to share. And this gentleman gets around. Michael Hurry, thanks so much for joining
happy
me
to be
today.
here. Happy to be here.
Yeah, we've gotten to know each other over the years. I think even pre-show we kind of knew each
I
other.
think you were at the radio station for a while,
See,
right?
no, right? Everybody thinks I worked at the
No.
radio. Well, I sort of did, but I wasn't
You were
on
there.
air.
No, but you were there for a while. And then you did, didn't you do karaoke at...
I was the karaoke guy. That's how we
Two
first
Amigos?
met. Yeah, that's right.
Because we used to
that
cycle,
as
that's where we always
well.
stopped.
That's right.
And we used to say, okay, Dave's coming on with the karaoke, it's time to get out.
It's time to leave. I know. I remember that.
Yeah.
Well, you've been, we've got a lot to talk about here, but I always start from the beginning. Are you from Sarnia originally, or where are you from?
I was born in England. My parents, my dad worked for the oldest furniture manufacturer in England, and they've been making furniture since the 1600s.
Oh, wow.
And in the 50s, Canada was looking for people to emigrate, and they were looking for tradespeople, right? So they got sort of recruited to come to Canada, and we moved here when I guess I started school here. So,
Okay.
but my dad worked
Like
on
public
this,
school?
Yeah, my
Yeah.
dad. We first lived in Stratford. He worked on building the Stratford Festival Theatre,
Oh, wow.
and then he built boats. He built houses at like Rosedale area in
Is that
Sarnia.
right?
And then he worked at Sarnia General as a maintenance. He ended up as a maintenance supervisor when he retired. But
Did you get some of his skills? Are you a handy guy?
I can do some stuff, but not like he was. We're just having our floors resanded in our house, and I can remember the last time we refinished the floors, he came in and had dinner, and then cut new quarter round for around the living room and dining room, just by eye. Like he didn't use the miters, he just cut it and fit it. And then we have a bay window that's
Wow.
fairly intricate cuts, but he did it all in that evening and put the stuff in and
Yes.
went home. So I can't do that.
Thanks, Dad.
I couldn't get the joints right with a miter saw, I don't think. But
Right. Yeah. No, all the wrenches I have are all left-handed.
Yeah.
That's, for sure.
But I worked with him a lot. We did some renovations together, so I picked up some things from him. But
Right.
I can paint. I do wallpaper.
Yeah. You're way further ahead than I am, Michael. Let me tell you. And what about Mom?
My mother was. I always thought they should have stayed in Stratford because my mother was an incredible seamstress. Like she made all her own clothes. She
Oh,
never
really?
bought clothes because they never fit right. If she bought something or somebody bought her a dress or whatever, she ended up taking it apart and putting it back together again because it didn't fit the way she wanted. And she never used a pattern. She used to. I can remember she used to watch soap operas, and if she saw a dress on there that she liked, she would get newspaper out and she would somehow create the pattern and make that, and she'd be wearing that dress a week later.
Wow.
So I think they would have been great at Stratford because Dad could have done the set design and Mom could have done, because if you've ever done the tour behind stage at Stratford, and you see the room where they have all the materials they use for costumes, and they literally go all over the world for buttons and trims and whatever for outfits. She would have loved that.
They both really had an eye.
Yeah, and
Sounds of it.
they worked really hard, worked multiple jobs to get ahead. So
And take care of family.
well, it's like immigrants. Most immigrants work pretty hard, right?
Agreed.
To get
Agreed.
established.
Brothers and sisters?
I got an older brother and a younger sister. So my older brother lives in Florida. He went to school in the States. He went on athletic scholarships.
Mm-hmm.
And played soccer, was a candidate for All-American, played in the first All-Star soccer game in the United States.
Wow.
Was asked to play for the U.S. Olympic team. But in those days, the U.S. Olympic soccer team wasn't going anywhere, and that was during the Vietnam War. So
Right.
if he'd taken citizenship out, he would have been eligible for the draft. So he didn't. My sister lives in Sarnia, but yeah, I'm in the middle.
You are the middle one.
And there's a big range in age between the three of us, right? So it's like three different families almost.
Wow. Yeah, I got 7 years apart from my sister, and sometimes I go, was I?
Well, my dad wanted to have another child, and my mother really wasn't crazy about the idea. But anyways, that's my sister's here, so.
Right.
She's the only one born in Canada, right? My brother and I were both born in England.
Right. And so sounds like a tight-knit family.
Yeah, you know what? I think we did a lot of stuff. I mean, we never had babysitters, you know. I mean, my mom went to work when my dad came home from work. We did lots of family vacations that were usually camping because that was
Oh yeah.
a cheap way to go on vacation
Yeah.
in those days. My mother preferred going to Michigan to go camping because the washrooms and the facilities were better those
Oh,
days
is
than
that
they were
right?
in Ontario. But they went to Florida every year. I used to drive my mother, after my dad died, I'd drive my mother down every winter with her car, and that way she had her car there for the winter. And then I'd fly home and then fly back down in the spring and drive her back. And so the nice thing was I got to spend some time with my brother who lived in Florida, and my nephew and I would do some stuff together while I was on one of those trips there to get her, to take her down.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
What? So growing up, like you just kind of talked about it there. You know, you didn't really have babysitters, and it sounded like mom and dad were
Yep.
both around, which I suppose it's pretty rare nowadays, and we'll lead into maybe part of why we're talking
maybe,
here.
yeah.
But, school? Did you like school?
Yeah, I did well in school. So Stuart, my older brother, was more the athletic side of things,
Yeah.
and he did really well, track and field, soccer, and whatever. I went more the academic side of things. So, he says it's funny now that, you know, he was the athlete and now he doesn't do anything, and I'm, you know, for the last 10, 15 years have been out climbing mountains. So
I know, right?
you know, he's a lot of fun because he's always telling people how his brother's this world famous mountaineer, you know.
Oh yeah, right.
And he just milks it for, you know, they think I'm, you know, the next, you know, Hillary or something. But
Yeah, right.
he has a lot of fun with it.
Yeah.
But yeah, I did well in school. Went to Lockheil Street School, which of course is still around, but
Yeah.
it's not a school anymore. And started at Skits, and then went to St. Clair, and then of course left to go to university.
Yeah. St. Clair, I went there too.
Did you?
That was.
You're a lot younger,
Yeah,
so
I'm much
yeah,
younger.
it must have been.
Like,
I was
at
long gone
least.
before. Yeah.
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 And but you enjoyed it then.
Yeah, I did well in school, and yeah, I think I could say academically.
Did you know what you wanted to do? Like, where?
If you'd asked me in grade, I mean, I think it was grade 7, they started, you know, sitting down with you one-on-one. I think you actually sat down with the principal to talk about, like, did you know what you wanted to do? And I think if you asked me at that time, I would have told you I wanted to be a lawyer, you know. And
Really?
I don't know when I switched to doing social services. I should have done maths, really, or sciences or something, because grade 13, I took 3 math courses in grade 13. And so then how do you end up them going into social sciences instead of math related stuff? Although it did help with statistics courses, I guess.
Right,
but,
right.
you know.
I could see you as a lawyer.
Yeah. It's I don't know whether there was some point in time where and I can't identify when that was. But.
And then, okay, so when did you get into the social services world?
Well, I went to university. I went to Wilfrid Laurier. My degree, it was in psychology and sociology, so I had a double major. The intent was that I was going to come out and work for a couple of years and then go back and do a master's. And I did start a master's, but I never finished it. It was just because I was trying to do it part-time while working, and it was too much. I was taking it in Michigan. It was probably one of the snowiest winters we'd had, and every Tuesday night we had to drive halfway to where Michigan State is. And I thought, this is crazy. You're going to die in a car accident trying to get your master's, so I never did finish it. But yeah, I guess I came back. I worked at the boys' home to begin with, at Huron House with Ken Stuthers and the guys out there. I worked at the community girls' home. I taught at Alexander Mackenzie just as a substitute teacher.
Okay.
Bill Padaky was he was a vice principal there, and I knew Bill from when he was at St. Clair, or when he was at Skits. And I think he just thought, well, if you can work with the boys at Huron House, you could probably deal with the guys at Alexander Mackenzie. So it was the only school I ever supply taught at. And
Ken Stuthers, though, talk about him. Like, he was there for years.
Yeah, Ken was there. You know, I mean, I was only there for a couple of years, and I see Ken every once in a while. He's still in town, and I think he's still part of the Seaway Kiwanis group, which he's been part of for years. Last time I saw him, there was a couple of kids that were there when I was there. One lives out, he lived in Winnipeg and he was here. I think his mom had passed away, so he was in town. And he's a cyclist, so we kept in touch and we cycled a couple of times together. And he called up and was going to get together with one of the other kids that was at the boys' home, years ago. The crazy thing is, I don't think I was retired at that time, and these guys who were boys at the boys' home were both retired. And,
wow.
Because when you're at the boys' home, they would be like probably 15 or 16 when I was 21.
I suppose,
working there, right? So
Yeah.
that's a big age difference then. But now, when
It's
you're
different. I
you're
know.
65, they're 60.
I still run into some of my high school teachers and principals, and I have different.
I was at the Y one day with Brandon talking to Bill. Do you know Bill Palmer? Bill was a vice principal at St. Clair High School when I was there.
Yeah.
And I said to Brandon, well, you know how old I am, Brandon. Just imagine how old this guy is. He was my vice principal.
Right.
Because Bill's probably I said to Bill, you're my hero, because he's like there at the Y working out. He's probably 80, mid to late
Still
80s.
giving her.
Still giving it, yeah.
And social services, I mean, what was that experience like at the boys' home at that? Because that was several years ago, but it was a different time, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
It was, it wasn't as highly staffed, I guess, as it is now. I mean, overnight, you only had one person that was there overnight, which I don't think that's the case now. I think there's 2 staff there overnight. It was bigger as far as the number of youth that were staying there at the time. I mean, the main floor, I think we had capacity for 24, and then there was the upstairs could have another half dozen. Where they don't have the same numbers now.
No.
It was busy. It was the kids, I think, stayed longer, is my sense, that they were there for a longer period of time than they are now. They're shorter stays now, but you'd have to talk to them to confirm that. That's just my perception, right?
And at what point you're married?
Yeah,
and
we've been
you're going to
married
be
for
celebrating
50
years.
Yeah,
Congratulations!
yeah.
I have to ask, what's the secret?
Well, you know what? I don't know. It's we both come from families that were intact, with grandparents that were in. I don't know if that may have something to do with
Lead
it.
by example, I
suppose,
right?
and that you sort of learned that somewhere along the line you don't necessarily always agree or always get along, but it's better than leaving and trying to start all over again, I guess. And somehow that message must have got through. And when we're both coming from situations where grandparents and parents were together, that probably does have an impact on
The word commitment means a lot more, I guess, right?
Yeah, and you know what? It's hard to believe it's 50 years.
Yeah, right.
The time just. Well, my mother always said, the older you get, the faster it goes, and she's right.
True.
She just passed away about a year and a half ago. She was pushing for 101. So.
Wow.
And she lived on her own till she was she was 99 and a half, before she moved into a nursing home. I don't know.
50 years, congratulations on that.
Yeah.
And what does Deb do?
Deb worked for Lamsar for years, so she was their controller. And she still, we still have contact. Dave's on the first climbing trip I did, Dave, who's one of the owners of Lamsar, we went on that trip together, and we've climbed all over the world together since. So we've become good friends with Dave and Mel. But yeah, and she still does some stuff. Dave has a family trust and stuff, so she still does some stuff for him. But
right.
I worked at Big Brothers for 40 years. She worked for Lamsar for probably almost as many years, right? So,
wow, amazing.
I did an interview with, he's passed away now.
Oh, J.D. Booth?
J.D. Booth once, and somewhere at the beginning of the interview I said, I'm either stable or boring. He said, what do you mean? I said, well, just thinking about it, at that time I said, I've been at Big Brothers for like 30 years. I've been married to the same lady for 32. We've lived in the same house for 29. I said, that's either stable or... So he did the whole article about that. At the end of it, he decided that I was stable. I wasn't boring.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're still in the same house. We've been in for years.
And talk about your family. You have 2 boys.
Yeah, I've had probably 5 little brothers over the years, and still have contact with all of them. But two boys, the last match I had were two brothers that were very close. They really, you could argue they would have really benefited from each having their own individual big brother, but they didn't want that. And the chances of finding them, somebody who would take on two teenagers because this is a new program we started with Children's Aid Society, where they were looking for us to find mentors for teenagers, right? Which is a little harder than finding mentors for younger kids.
Right.
People are scared of teenagers, I guess.
Yeah.
And so I'd been matched with a kid on the reserve, and that match had come to an end. So I was looking to get rematched, and I thought, nobody else is probably going to take these two guys on. So I decided I would get matched to them. And the placement they were in, because they were out of their home, they were placed in a what they call a kinship situation.
Okay.
It broke down for the oldest boy, and Children's Aid said, would you consider, and we'd already told Children's Aid said, if anything happens, we're not going to undermine it, we're not going to say anything to the boys, but if anything happens, we would consider taking them in. So Jamie moved in when he was 16, and Brandon moved in a few months later when he was 15 so 16. So we went from, I always say to people, we went from being dinks, double income, no kids.
Yeah, that's right. I remember those.
To two teenage boys overnight.
Yeah.
And I think it's been, if you talk to them, I think they would agree that it's been really good for them. It's been good for us, right?
Yeah.
It's
Changed
our life.
I mean, you go to the obvious and you say, okay, we're helping these young boys, but for you and Deb, how is it?
It's been. I think it's been great for all of us, right? I mean, we're really tight as a family, even though they didn't move in till they were 16 and 15.
Yeah.
I mean, it hasn't been perfect. Have we had issues? Yeah. Have we had challenges? Yes. And I always say, you know what, this is new for us, so we're going to make mistakes, and I always believe that if I'm in the wrong, then I should apologize, which I do.
Yeah.
And we've had. They're both very open, so we have good dialogue and good conversations.
That helps.
And it does help a lot. And they're still with us, right? I mean, they both moved out. We didn't downsize fast enough. And Jamie went to school. Jamie's a nurse, and he finished school. And he didn't want to go away to school. He wanted to either have school here or drive back and forth to Chatham. And I said, no, if you're going to Chatham, then you need to move to Chatham. You need to have that experience. That's a stepping stone. But I think he was thinking that would be the end and that we were basically kicking him out. I said, you can come home weekends, summers, Christmas. This is your home, right? Forever. So anyways, he's back. And we have an apartment upstairs. So we let him move into the upstairs apartment. So he has his own entrance and, his own space and whatever. And Brandon's still living with us downstairs. But he's at Lambton College. I just dropped him off at Lambton College this morning before I came here to see you. What's he taking there? So he's doing upgrading right now, and with the plan of doing an HVAC course there. So cash for life.
Yeah, right.
I think he's going to make more money than his brother as a nurse. But
it's great that you've been able to have that experience and like you say, sort of unexpectedly, but at the same
it wasn't
time,
planned. Wasn't planned.
You were happy to do it.
And you know what? And they've traveled with us, so they. I was just saying. So Brandon, the 1 year, was in 11 countries in 1 year, and these are kids that lived in low-income housing. And now that wasn't all with us. He went to Patagonia with me, and so we did Chile, Argentina, Brazil, and Uruguay on that trip. And he came back, and I said, I'm going back to Nepal in March or April of the following year. You should come with me. And to begin with, he said, no. Anyways, he ended up coming, and we went to Nepal and Bhutan. And then he came back from that and said him and a buddy were going to go to Europe. So they went to Europe and did, Germany, France, the Netherlands. And,
fantastic.
The first time Jamie went with me, he went to Nepal. And we were landing in Toronto, and he said to me, I've been to Nepal. And I said, well, yeah, obviously. He said, well, let me finish. He said, but I've never been to the CN Tower. I've never been to Niagara Falls.
Oh.
I thought, isn't that bizarre to think this kid's been, because I said, I'm going. You should come. But I'm not paying your way. You have to raise the money.
Fair enough.
Because if you don't have some skin in the game, you're not going to appreciate it. And both boys have been on trips to do, like building trips.
Yep.
Went to Haiti. Jamie went to Haiti, and Brandon and I built houses in the slums in Dominican Republic, which I think is an experience every kid should have, right? Just you come back with an appreciation of what you've got here, and especially for kids that grew up in low-income housing, to
Right.
see that, where here they sort of feel that they've been left behind and they didn't get to do the things that
Ripped
other kids.
off a little, maybe, yeah.
Jamie was really upset that he never got to play sports as a kid because they had no money to do that. And if you remember, it used to be when you went to school, you got to play sports for free, right?
Yeah.
But I
Just
can
pick
remember,
the one you want.
Yeah, Brandon being at Skits, and he wanted to wrestle. It was $140 for wrestling shoes, and they wanted you to either donate money or fundraise so that they could go to do meets. And so kids that don't have that income or the family behind them that has the dollars to do that can't do it. So.
Well, where did let's back up a little bit there. Obviously, traveling's in you.
Yeah.
We could do several hours probably on that one. But let's talk about the cycling.
Oh yeah.
And how that first kind of came along. Like say, it's when I first met you, that was what you were doing. So
Yeah,
it's been a long time.
It does. I think the first fundraising adventure kind of thing that we did for Big Brothers was Tom Saint-Amand and I cycled from Sarnia to Ottawa. And I started cycling before that, and I can remember I was going to do a cycling trip up to Port Elgin, and I said to Tom, you know what? I don't know. I've only cycled like 15 or 20 kilometers, and this is going to be like 80 kilometers a day for a week.
Right.
I wasn't telling anybody I was doing it because I didn't think I could. I wasn't sure I could do it, right? So he said, "Well, we'll go," and we cycled to Forest and back, and that was the longest I'd done.
Wow.
And yeah, my dad was a cyclist. He brought his bike from England, and that probably goes back to those days.
I didn't realize just how big it was a few years ago.
Oh, it's becoming big.
I rode my motorcycle out east.
Yeah.
And would stop and see a cyclist and go, "Oh, hey, where are you from?" Like I thought maybe it was from, Newfoundland.
Oh yeah,
and coming all across Canada here.
Yeah.
But you did something similar to that too.
Well, you know what? I've always wanted to cycle across Canada, as all these other things, you get the idea that if you're going to do something like that, you may as well make it into a fundraiser, right? Because I'm going to go and do it anyways. May as well raise some money for Big Brothers Big Sisters is usually what I end up raising money for, although I've done other things. But so we bought an RV, my wife and I, just for the idea that Deb would follow me in this RV with the dog, and I would cycle. We started in Victoria. We were gonna do it in 21, 22. It was always going to be over 2 years. Part of the reason for that is if I do it over 2 years, I get to ask you for 2 donations.
Right, you're clever.
And so we set off. We started in Victoria, BC with 2 friends I've done lots of stuff with, cycling being one of them, and they cycled with me. The one guy has a place in Nelson, BC, so he cycled from Victoria to Nelson. The other guy is a young guy, works in Imperial Oil, so he cycled and flew out of Calgary to come back home. And then I cycled by myself with Deb and the dog, following all the way to Marathon in Northern Ontario. The plan had been to cycle back to Sarnia, but one of my oldest friends had cancer, and I'd said to his family, anything happens, call me. And I was on the highway near Marathon when they called and said they were moving him to hospice. And basically, if I wanted to see him, that I needed to come. I just called Deb. She came pick me up, and we drove to Toronto. I spent that night with him, and he died the next day. So it was good. It was the right thing to do because the road wasn't going anywhere. And I said to Deb at the time, you know what? We haven't lost a lot of time. We could drive back up and continue to ride, but it was October by then, and the road was getting pretty cold, and pretty windy, and it was pretty miserable. So I just thought.
I would think in all of this too, there's a lot of planning.
Oh yeah,
like planning hotels or wherever.
Well, the nice thing was
road maps and.
After Labor Day, we're in an RV, right? So we're just staying, we're camping, right? And which is less expensive, of course. And but after Labor Day, we didn't have to do much planning as far as where we're staying because everybody goes home and kids go back to school, and we could just roll in, and there was always a camping spot.
Right. Or a Walmart parking lot.
Yeah, we did. Well, we did some. What do they call it? Where there's places. where you go and you can just park and you're in the wilderness, but it's
Oh yeah.
I forget, there's a name for it, but some of them are great sites. You have no facilities, right? No washrooms
Right.
or no plug-ins or no fire pits or that, but it's land that you're just allowed to park on it. It was a great experience. Deb really enjoyed it too, because all she had to do was drive 100 or 120 kilometers a day, and then she could park, take the dog for a walk,
Right.
figure out what we're having for dinner, sit and read, and we had great weather. And
That helps.
and we didn't have any issues with forest fires, where the year after, 2023 should have been the second half of this trip, and that's the year, if you remember, Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia were just ablaze with forest fires, so we didn't do it that year. 2024, I had a friend who needed a double lung transplant,
Okay.
and I said to him, I'll get you through the process to get you on the waiting list, and I'll get you through the lung transplant if you make the waiting list. So he got the lungs June of last year, and I was basically in Toronto. I was in Toronto half the week and in Sarnia half the week, so I'd go down, visit with him and take care of whatever he needed. But he passed away in December, so didn't make it. And anyway, so that means 2025 is the year to finish the trip. And my cousin is actually flying in from England, so I'm going to meet him in Montreal, and he's going to cycle from Montreal to the East Coast with me, which will be kind of fun. Although the other day on the phone he called me and said, you realize that you have to ride this entire thing because you've committed to do this? And I said, yeah. He said, I don't. He said,
I haven't told anybody.
He said, if I don't feel like doing it, he said, I'm just going to hang out with Deb and the dog in the RV for the day, and because I haven't made a commitment to anybody to do this, right? But we get along really, really well, so it'll be fun.
Talk about Big Brothers, Big Sisters. You mentioned it a few times. For those that don't know, you were executive director for many, many years. Do you remember how you first?
Well, I worked at Big Brothers. I worked at the boys' home for a couple of years, and they had a casework position open at Big Brothers. And after a couple of years, the boys' home was great, but a couple of years of working shifts and overnights and weekends and missing out on stuff, The idea of having a Monday to Friday, they said 9 to 5, but
right.
They didn't say it was 9 a.m. to 5 a.m. But
9 to 5 and then on call for the rest.
Yeah, so I mean, there's lots of stuff, evenings and weekends and whatever, but at least I was home every night and, got to sleep with my wife at home and not be at the boys' home, and didn't miss out on family functions that were on weekends and stuff, because you could plan around that. So I applied for a casework job and came to work for Big Brothers. And then Oliver Schragen, who was the executive director at the time, we got into some really tough financial situations.
Okay.
And, the board decided to leave the United Way, that we were going to do this on our own because they were concerned about some of the restrictions or whatever on the agency.
Yep.
And we left, and then ended up in pretty tight financial situation, and Al resigned, and I became the interim executive director, and then they finally hired me as the executive director. And then, of course, we went through the process years later of amalgamating with Big Sisters and becoming...
And that's been a great choice.
Yeah, it has, I think. It's there's not very many agencies, there are not very many communities across Canada that still have a Big Brother and a Big Sister agency. There are a few, maybe 4 or 5 in all of Canada, but most of them have amalgamated.
Really?
Yeah, I think...
See, I just assumed every community has a Big Brothers, Big Sisters.
Well, you know what, they
started
started...
need, right?
Yeah, they started as... But they started as 2 separate agencies, right?
Yeah.
And actually, Brother Al Verstraeten, I don't know if you remember Brother Al, he just passed away last year.
No.
But he was one of the founders of Big Brothers in Sarnia, and he was also a founder of Big Sisters in Sarnia, but 2 separate agencies, I think about 2 years apart. He was part of the Brothers of St. Louis, and saw a need for kids who were coming from single-parent homes where the moms needed some support while they were in counseling or whatever, so he started up a program for boys, and then a couple of years later helped to start Big Sisters, right? So
you would have seen a lot of changes, for that many years that you were there, like just generational, or just how the kids were, even in the different types of situations that were coming along.
And I think, I don't know, I think kids have more challenges now than they did years ago, and
Yeah, I'll
you
agree
know,
with
I
that.
think the agency probably deals with more multi-agency kids, the kids where kids are involved in with a lot of different organizations. Um, yeah, it's and you know what it's yeah it's constantly changing, I guess,
Yeah.
and but it
Well,
was
technology alone, let's,
yeah,
the
that
cell
makes
phone,
a
it
big
that's,
difference.
that's
Yeah,
brought on a
yeah.
lot of challenges.
Yeah, and if you look at I don't know, there was a video that Deb and I watched about social media and the impact it's had on kids. Not a lot of it's been very positive. A lot of it's been pretty negative stuff. And I can remember in the one video they were interviewing guys like at Facebook, and and these guys are saying, "Oh no, my kid doesn't have a cell phone." Like, so these guys would not let their kids have cell phones until
Right.
they were like teenagers. Like
Yeah.
they kept them away, and where now it's quite. You see lots of little
They're
kids.
born with it.
Yeah, yeah.
They're born with it.
Yeah.
Well, and let's talk about that a little bit from your side of things. I mean, I'm a social media guy. I
Right.
always have mine with me, but it's a tool for me. And communication is there,
Yeah.
but it's a tool for me. But I think if I was a teenager, like, it's a different purpose.
Yeah.
It's
Well, you know,
sharing pictures.
Yeah,
and-
I mean, we all did stupid things when we were kids.
Sure. Yeah.
But when you and I were growing up doing stupid things, there wasn't somebody there taking pictures or filming it and
No.
posting it, right? The 2 or 3 guys, buddies you were with, knew you did some stupid thing, and they would continue to remind you of that just to get you, right?
Yeah.
But they weren't showing pictures or,
No.
it just stuck with that small group of people, right?
And
Where-
bullying. I mean, there was
Yeah.
a tool. It's a tool for bullying
Yeah,
often.
yeah. It's I think that I feel I grew up in one of the best times, really. And we had 2 rules when I was a kid. I had to be home for dinner, and if we went down to Canatera to go swimming, we had to swim where the lifeguards were, because we'd be on our bikes and gone, right? And
Me too. I remember. Yeah.
I had friends that would go and camp older friend that they camped at Imperial Oil on their property. and every couple of days a parent would show up to see if they were all right and did they have enough food and were they getting along. But, they were there for the week, like.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy to think?
Yeah. I can remember when I was 16, I said to my dad, there's 4 of us that, we're talking about we'd like to go to Florida for March break. And he asked me, maybe 4 or 5 questions, like who are you going with, how, whose car, how much money do you have a place to stay, basic questions. And I answered them. He said, okay. And so I said to parents now, so would you let your child go to London without a credit card, a debit card, a cell phone, and just a small amount of money? I think you're crazy. Well, we went to Florida, never talked to our parents for probably 10 or 12 days we were gone. And my dad said, he was 13 when he went to work. And he just figures, he said, years later when I talked to him, he said, you know what, if I hadn't taught you what you needed to do and how you needed to handle things by the time you were 16 when you were asking me to go to Florida, then I haven't done my job, basically. And
That's fair.
off we went, and
Do you think we're you talk about the traveling, and that's obviously a big part of you, and but what you're saying there now of we used to take off for a week at a time.
Yeah.
I interviewed a young lady a while ago who had bought a little car, and she drives all over across. She was in Texas and everything. She's like 18.
Yeah.
And I remember hearing that as a dad myself and going, ugh.
Yeah.
But are we too protective?
Well, you know what, I think that the world can be a dangerous place, but
But it always was.
it always was. And I think that I don't know, some people have just a sense of where they are spatially and what's going on around them, whether it's behind you or, and you can get into bad situations anywhere in Toronto or
Well, you look at
Istanbul
Detroit.
or
You
Detroit.
hear
I mean,
Detroit and you go, oh, that's terrible.
Yeah.
There's some really nice places
Well,
in Detroit.
I love Detroit.
right?
I think Detroit's
I
a
think
great
it's
city.
a great city. Yeah.
But you know what? People talk about how dangerous it is to go places. It's like some of the places I've been. And I think, you know what? One of the most dangerous places in the world is right across the river.
Right,
You know?
it can be. Yeah.
I just read something looking at a city, and they compared it to Indianapolis, which, I said to somebody, you wouldn't think twice about going to Indianapolis, would you? And Indianapolis is far dangerous than this third world place. I can't remember now exactly.
Yeah.
It would mean more if I could remember what city I was comparing it to. But yeah, there's lots of, you just have to be not stupid, right? I mean, make good decisions. And
well, it sounds like with the traveling in there too, like a lot of places in Europe you've been, etc. I think you made a good point where you say we get comfortable where we go, like, here's where we live here in Sarnia, whatever. I've been to Europe twice now,
right.
And the experience, I'm just like, wow. Like, don't get me wrong, I love it here, and I love Canada.
Oh yeah,
and
I do
everything.
too. I think we're very lucky.
But there's a ton of stuff out there that we could go see, and it's not. I mean, sure, you can spend a lot of money doing this kind of stuff, but it really is affordable when you think about transportation these days.
And you know what? I think when you get out and travel and you see people are basically the same the world over, right? Everybody wants to improve their life, wants to have a better life for their kids. They want their kids to get a better education, get a better job.
Yeah, it's kind of built into us.
Most people are kind, and you know what? It's when you go, and you really learn that if you travel by yourself. Or when I was cycling, especially when the other guys had left and I was cycling by myself, people will stop and talk to you. And I got into a really great conversation in a little park where I pulled off the road, and there was a lady there, and we struck up a conversation. Right. She was probably in her 80s, and we talked for half an hour about little towns. And she said after she retired, she lived in Winnipeg, she traveled all across, Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta, because her destination was going to be Calgary, but she just thought she'd go back roads, and she went to a different little town every day. She stopped like 2 o'clock in the afternoon, tour around the town, stay in a mom and pop, motel, ate in the local restaurant. She said she wasn't in a chain restaurant or hotel the whole month she was traveling.
Wow.
And we just had a really great conversation. I was cycling along at one point in time in Manitoba, and all of a sudden somebody's talking. I'm thinking, and I look over, and two guys in a car have slowed down. We're on a back highway, right? Not the main Trans-Canada. They slow down. They're like beside me saying, "Where are you going? What are you doing? And do you need a ride? And I said, if we're going to have a conversation, we should pull over, And they're First Nation from one of the reserves in Manitoba. We had a great conversation on the side of the road about, apartheid and comparing the system. A lot of people don't realize that the apartheid system in South Africa was based on the Canadian Reserve System, right?
Oh.
South Africa decided, hey, here's this country that's parked their native population on land that is just theirs and they're not allowed to leave. We can do that in South Africa, right?
Oh.
So you ask Canadians about apartheid, they think it's horrible, but they don't realize where it came from, right? We talked about, reparations, the school system where they're, taking kids off and putting them in residential schools. And we had this great conversation on the side of the road, because you're approachable when you're by yourself, right?
For sure. Too bad you didn't have a camera with you.
Yeah, I took pictures. One of the pictures I posted that day was a picture of me and these two guys at the side of the road. And but one of the interesting stories, after 9/11, there was a guy in Scotland. He was interviewed on CBC, and he said he just got so tired of hearing about how dangerous the world was and how we had to be, safe and don't travel and don't go places. And he set off from Glasgow with a cell phone, and he set up a web page. He had his laptop with him. He had no credit cards, no money. He had his passport. And he posted and said, I'm in Glasgow. I'd like to get a ride. I'd like to make it to London, England today. And if I get there, I need a place to stay. And he traveled around the entire world just on the friendship and kindness of people. So
can you imagine?
It just to prove that.
Well, that's a faith thing, right?
Yeah, it is a faith thing, And I know he was in Australia, and it was a business lady in Canada that heard his story and flew him from Australia to Vancouver. Because she said, I travel all the time, I have all these points, I'm never going to use them because I don't want to get on a plane when I'm not working. And he traveled all across Canada. He took a ferry to Greenland. And I think an airliner flew him home from Greenland back to Scotland. But just, because he said it just to prove, like, people are kind. People, like, will let you stay at their place, and people have let me stay at their place, because they want to hear what you're doing and why you're doing it and where you're going next.
Wow.
And they sort of live vicariously, I guess.
That's an incredible story because, I mean, there's a lot of, the faith thing. I mean,
Yeah.
I didn't leave my house to come here to see you without making sure I got my wallet in my back pocket and a little bit of cash, maybe,
Yeah.
you know.
I
You
don't
have
know
to
how
do
many-
the world.
Yeah, I don't know how many times I've left. I got home, I don't have my wallet with me, and I end up in places and think, I have no money, no credit cards, no debit card.
I'm not buying you lunch.
I've had coffee. I once was somewhere, and Tanya Wolf had written me a check. She owed me some money. She wrote me a check for $150. And I called her and said, do you know anybody here that if I countersigned this check would cash it for me because I need the money? Another time I had to call my brother-in-law and say, can you come down and bring me $100, and because I don't have any money with me. And so, I never know where my wallet is. It's one of my problems.
You touched a very good point in this, I guess in the central part of that conversation is that people all want the same thing. They want
they do.
success. They want the best for their children and their family. And typically, the parent wants the child to have more than whatever they had before, right? And that's no matter where you go. It's like it's born into us to survive. And I think to typically be kind. And I mean, sometimes we have bad days. Some of us, we might have come across like a jerk and we didn't mean to. Or I always say it's if the person is not being, it's just a test.
Yeah.
How you respond to it, all that sort of stuff.
I can remember I don't know. Do you remember when Wayne Gretzky was here and he golfed at Huron Oaks?
I do.
And it poured rain, and I mean, a lot of people don't realize at the time. And
I think
maybe
that
it's
was
still
in the 80s.
Yeah. Still the case that he has a fear of flying. He's not a fan of flying.
Oh, is that
and
right?
of course, to fly into Sarnia, you have to fly in this little plane.
Right.
It's miserable weather. I think he has, like there was large crowds there, and I had a poster that his dad had signed, and I took it out thinking if I can get Wayne to sign it, because it's him on the ice when he played for LA. But there's different pictures within this picture, and his dad signed. That's the only thing he signed that day that I've seen that was really nicely done.
Oh, yeah.
And because you could read it, his signature, and it said 99.
okay.
A lot of the stuff he signed, it was just like a scrawl.
Yeah.
But people don't think that he can have a bad day, or he can not be
this is
feeling
it, right?
good, or and
all that
we expect
money,
him.
all
that,
yeah.
But he's just human, and he has good days and bad days, and so give the person a bit of,
a little bit of leeway. Sometimes.
But Deb and I just came back from Morocco, and we had a guide there who, at the end of the day, said, you should come to our house for dinner the next day. And I said, well, we're meeting another couple the next day. And he said, that's okay, bring them too. Nicest guy. Came, picked us up.
See, there it is.
Met his
well,
wife
that's okay.
and his
Bring
kids.
them along too. Yeah.
Met his wife and kids. He called me the other day. We've kept in touch. And he just said, anytime you're back, you're welcome to stay at my place. And I'll go back, just because, he was so kind and so accommodating. And, we've started talking about, he's from the desert, so he was a Bedouin, born and raised in the Sahara.
Oh, wow.
So I've talked to him about going back and doing a hike across the Sahara with him. I said, as long as we can bring a spare camel, just in case I can't make it, you can throw me over the camel, right? He said, okay. He said, we'll bring 2 spares. But he said, what, we'll stay in a cave with a Bedouin family partway across the desert. I'm thinking, now that sounds wonderful, right? So are you coming?
Well, I knew the question was, right at some point I knew this was going to happen. You've been asking me, and
I ask everybody.
all the time.
Yeah.
Well,
the youngest boy
right.
the other day said to me, you're a salesman. I said, well, everybody's a salesman. We're all selling
you just
something.
got to
right?
ask, though.
And I wouldn't want to come back and have you say to me, why didn't you invite me? Because I've always wanted to go to the Sahara.
I would love to do it. I just don't know that this body is capable of surviving.
Yeah, it is.
You hear, well,
I mean,
talk about that. We haven't even gotten there
remember Dick Carpani? Dick was on, ran for the Conservatives federally. He was on city council for a couple of terms. And he went with me to Kili when he was late 70s. He didn't tell anybody he was going because he didn't know he was going to make it. And I think it was 78. And he made it up and down. And we got up there, and he said to me, "How am I going to get down?" I said, "The same way you got up, 1 foot at a time."
I
because
feel
he was
like I'd
exhausted,
slow others down.
Well, that's okay. It's not a race. It's the first thing they say is pole, slow. And quite
You're not
often,
going to let me give you an excuse.
no, quite often the person who's been the slowest first day, that's the person they move to the front of the line. They say, "Okay, everybody, that's the pace we want you to set."
Really?
Yeah, because the slower you go, the more you're going to acclimatize. It's not a race. We just have to get to the other end of the day.
It'd be a really slow race with me.
Yeah.
What about, like, how did that start, climbing mountains?
Well, you know what? So I just come back from a trip. I did a trip in the Arctic, which people think that's a crazy place to go because there's just snow, right? Snow and rocks, and it's.
Well, when you look at it, when we were in school, we saw it on a map, and that's all there was blue and white.
Yeah, and that's pretty well, But we went there in August and did a hike in Iuituk, which is a national park on Baffin Island. And I just come back from that. It was the first year they had hospice, so the hospice gala.
Oh yeah, right.
And I can't remember what year that was, but that will give you an idea when it was. And I was there, and a lady that worked at Family Counseling Center, we were just chatting at the gala, and she asked me about the trip, and then she said, out of the blue, she said, "We should climb Kilimanjaro." And I said, "Yeah, we should." I always say, you should be really careful what you agree to when you've had a couple of glasses of wine.
Right.
Anyways, a couple of months later, a friend of mine, Grant Hill, I don't know if you remember Grant, sent me an article that was in the National Post about a fundraising trip that was, I think it was Kidney Foundation was doing to climb Kilimanjaro. So I called Sherry and said, you said about climbing Kili, do you want to do it as a joint fundraiser between the two agencies? Because she was fundraising for family counseling at the time. Anyways, we ended up going. It ended up just being big brothers, but it started out from that discussion. I never had any interest in climbing mountains. I'm thinking, why would you do that? I mean, I like.
It's kind of what comes to my mind.
Yeah,
Mike.
I like, I mean, I've always liked interior canoe trips or that kind of stuff, but I had never been on my radar to climb a mountain. And I think then what happens as you go, we did it in February that year. We had 24 people go. It was the best fundraiser we'd ever done at that time. And we came back with two thoughts. One was, we need to do this again.
Let's
and
do that
something
again,
else. And there was such interest in the community. We rented the auditorium at the library for 2 presentations and invited anybody in the community to come. Don't have to pay anything. We just want to tell you about our trip, because people were stopping us on the street saying,
How was that?
Yeah, and the radio station was doing interviews because George went with us, and so there's lots of stuff on the radio, and it just captured people's imagination. So we thought we need to have something planned so that when we do these 2 presentations at the library, that we have our next. So that's when we announced we're going to go to base camp on Everest.
Here.
Because we thought we got all this attention, we may as well get the message out there.
Good
But
for
it's, but this will be. I'm going back to Kili in September, end of September, and to climb Kilimanjaro again. I don't know. This will be my 6th time. I don't know if I'm going to go to the summit. I'll go to high camp with the guys that are going with me, but I'll see how I feel, and there's no need to go to summit. I can let them exhaust themselves going up and coming back down, and just join them for the downslide. But
and you've always put the attachment of, well, you said it earlier. It's like, well, if we're going to do this, might as well raise some money at the same time.
Yeah,
it's just
I think so.
A no-brainer. Geez, almost out of time here. I got a few minutes left, but talk about COVID and doing the hair.
Oh yeah, so that was a year. I forget where we were going. We're supposed to be climbing a mountain in September, October, and COVID had hit earlier in the year, and we had to cancel that. There was no way anybody was going anywhere.
What do we do now?
And 3 separate conversations with 3 people in town, I said, can't raise any money, doing the climb. What could I do to raise some money? And all 3 of them, independent of each other, said, if you cut your hair, you could probably raise some money. And then Anita Malili said, well, why don't you set stages? If you set 3 goals, if you get to $10,000, dye your hair. If you get to $15,000, dye your beard. And if you get to 20, then you shave it all off. And
and you did.
That's what we did. And I said to people, so if you donated money, I say, do you want to come? We're going to do this event where we shaved
I remember
my
we
head.
live streamed it
Yeah.
at the Refined Fool.
Yeah, I said, do you want to come and shave part of my head? Well, everybody said no. So my little brother at the time was 15, and I said to him, do you want to come and shave my head? And what they did is shave this half of my head, and then
Yeah.
we'd sit and have a beer, chit chat or whatever, and then this half of my beard, and then eventually I ended up with just a strip down the center. And he said, yeah, he'd come. So he had his hoodie on, came, shaved half my head, but he wouldn't take his hoodie off. At the end of it, when my whole head was shaved off, he took his hoodie off, and he was bald. He'd shaved his head the night
Wow.
before, just so we both looked the same, which I thought was pretty neat for a 15-year-old kid to do. And we're still matched, or we're still together. We're not matched, but
Yeah,
he's 18. We're actually going to dinner and a movie tonight. But,
nice.
Great kid. Yeah.
That's awesome that you've been able to do that. Boy, I wish we have so much more we could talk about. One of the things I get from you, though, and I always have, is that you're very inspiring. Like when you talk, and
Well,
I mean, just to be able to travel and encourage,
Yeah.
and you talk about the kindness all over the world. That's that shines out a lot when you just walk around a room.
Well, you know what? I honestly want I want all my friends to go on one of these trips, right? And I'm constantly saying that because I think you're missing out if you don't. And
Yeah.
I think that I've had so many great experiences that I just want to share that with anybody who's willing, interested, and wants to go. And I'm now saying to them, you know what? I'm not getting any younger, so I don't know how many more trips I've got.
Maybe I'll send my wife.
Yeah, well, I said that
She
to a
could
couple of
go.
guys. You stay home, your wife can come, and you can take care of the kids. You know, like
Right? My kids are grown, so
Yeah,
I don't have to worry about that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you
Well,
for
thank
your
you.
time and
Yeah.
everything you've done here in our community.
Yeah.
And the other word that comes to mind when I think of you is genuine. Like everything you do,
Wow.
sure you had a job to do, but it's all genuine and sincere.
Well, thank
and
you.
It's
Yeah.
very well recognized. So thank you for all of that.
Two
And-
quick
yeah,
things.
Yeah, go ahead.
Slow roll, June the 8th.
Yeah.
We want the entire community to come out. We're going to cycle about 11K in Sarnia with a police escort. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. It's mom, dad, grandma, grandpa, and the kids. So we're starting at the Legion, 2 o'clock, June the 8th. So come out and join us.
Awesome. We'll put that in the
And
comments as well.
yeah, I'm going to do the last half of my bike ride across Canada. So starting May 15th.
Okay,
Okay,
all right.
so
We're gonna get.
watch for that.
We got to get him some more money, and we got to get you to click the love button out there. And of course, the most important button is the share button. So please do that so we can share Michael's story and everybody else I have in the show. But as always, that's all the time I got for you this week. Have a great week and an even better weekend. We'll see you next time right here on the show. Bye for now.